And you have music there. And this is the advertisement, and this poster has a chronology here, so just check it out. You have 3 different types of handout.
Okay, I have to say that I'm delighted to be able to introduce the panel to you. And you've seen some of the information and some of the tribunal about the comfort women. Yes, I'm so happy that they're here, and I kind of think that this brings everything together that we've been talking about and the implications for the future.
Hello everyone, thank you for inviting us. And we are VAURAC, and VAURAC means Violence Against Women in War Research Action Center. And this flag is our flag. And the title of our panel is Sexual Slavery or Necessary Evil. The subtitle is Why Can Japan Not Resolve the Issue of Comfort Women? And please look at our papers we delivered all of you, and also please look at the picture on the screen. And my name is Akane Onozawa, and the title of my presentation is the two sexual slavery system. And subtitle is Comfort Women under the Japanese Military and Licensed Prostitution. The first, who are comfort women? The term comfort women refers to women who were confined in so-called comfort stations, which the Japanese Army and Navy set up in war fields and occupied territories starting the year after Japan began invading northeastern China in 1932 through Japan's defeat in 1945, where women were subjected to acts of sex and violence by Japanese soldiers. Comfort women included Japanese, Korean, Taiwanese, Chinese, Filipino, Indonesian, Vietnamese, Malaysian, Thai, Burmese, Indian, Timorese, Chamorro, Dutch, and Eurasian women, among others, who were threatened, abducted, deceived, trafficked, and otherwise forcibly taken to comfort stations. In many cases, women taken from Japan as well as Korea and Taiwan under Japanese colonial rule were deceived and trafficked by private agencies contracted by the Japanese military. On the other hand, in Japan's occupied territories in China, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific, the Japanese military often directly ordered recruitment of women, or in ordering village heads and local authorities to conscript women. Actual circumstances, wartime sexual slavery system. The actual circumstances of comfort women constituted wartime sexual slavery. The fact that the Japanese military used the term comfort women to refer to the women forced to serve as sex slaves, despite the fact that the experience of these women had nothing to do with comfort, can be said to be the expression of the Japanese military's ultimate male-centric mindset. The number of comfort stations and comfort women rapidly increased after the outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937. After the onset of the Asia-Pacific War in 1941, they were instituted on a widespread basis throughout all territories occupied by the Japanese military. And look at this picture. This is a map of the comfort stations on our website named Fight for Justice. The second map, please. And this is also the map of comfort stations. All over the military's territories, there were comfort stations. And this map we can selling. We will be selling this map here. So if you want, please say to me at 2 points. And comfort women were in the worst cases subjected to rape by dozens of soldiers on a daily basis, accompanied by abuse, including punching and kicking, attacks by a sword, burning, impregnation, and uterus mutilation. Comfort women were also forcibly subjected to testing for sexually transmitted diseases. They were brutally lynched or murdered if captured while attempting to escape. The Japanese military justified the practice of comfort stations under the preface that it prevented the spread of STDs and rape in the field of combat. Actually, comfort stations did not succeed in preventing either of these. And look at this picture on the screen. This is the entrance of the comfort stations. At the entrance to a comfort station, the board on the left said, Yamato Nadeshiko devotes all of her body and soul to serve customers. Yamato Nadeshiko means Japanese women. However, in reality, racial diverse females were forced to become comfort women. And next picture, please. This is also the comfort stations in Shanghai. And the women in kimono, Japanese clothes in Japanese kimono, is a comfort woman. And please, next picture. This is a picture of soldiers who crowded around the comfort stations at Nanking. And they were comfort women who were captured by U.S. Army. Women at the right hand was pregnant. And her name was Park Yeon-shin. She was Korean. So look at our papers again. Another sexual slavery system, Japan's pre-war licensed prostitution. Japan's pre-war licensed prostitution system also needs to be examined as another system of sexual slavery that factored into the creation of the wartime sexual slavery by the Japanese military. The licensed prostitution system in modern Japan designated official red light districts, prostitution areas, and rest stops, towns with lodgings situated along Edo period highways of the early modern era as areas where prostitution could be openly practiced and provided licenses to business owners and women to conduct business in these locations. And look at this picture on the screen. This is a postcard of a Japanese most famous red light district named Yoshiwara. And this very large red light district, and there was very famous sightseeing point it was. And next, this is also a picture of red light district. And this is a prostitute inside the largest window. And men look around these windows and chose prostitutes, you know. And I looked at papers again. There are three notable characteristics of Japan's licensed prostitution system. First, the licensed prostitution system was justified on the same premise of preventing STDs and rape. As such, prostitutes were forced to undergo STD testing. However, licensed prostitution also failed to prevent STDs as well as rape. During the Edo period, human sex trafficking was openly practiced under the licensed prostitution system in Japan's red light districts. This custom fundamentally continued into the modern era, and in a typical case, parents would incur heavy debts with prostitution agencies, and their daughters would be forced into continuous prostitution until the debts were repaid. Daughters would be forced into continuous prostitution in order to pay back her parents' debts. You know, and the exploitative wage system made it extremely difficult to pay off debts or to leave prostitution. Such practice should have been banned, as it was in breach of a number of international treaties at that time, including the International Convention for the Suppression of the Traffic in Women and Children, Convention on the Abolition of Slavery. And third characteristics, the Japanese government covered up the existence of sex trafficking, which should rightly have been banned, while repeatedly making the disingenuous assertion that the women who engaged in prostitution did so based on free will, and as a result continue to preserve that practice. And next issue, the relationship between the two sexual slavery systems. As sex trafficking was openly practiced at the onset of the war, a large number of licensed prostitution were deployed as comfort women. There are even cases where such women referred to this period as a good time, because the women, in some cases, were able to pay off large debts by serving as comfort women. Japanese women often became comfort women for officers and received better treatment than comfort women for generally conscripted soldiers. In terms of the treatment of comfort women, there was ethnic discrimination. However, this is no more than an indication of the brutality of life in prostitution prior to transitioning to comfort women. Under Japanese colonial rule, the licensed prostitution system was transplanted to Korea and Taiwan. However, the licensed prostitution system and the Japanese military's comfort women system were different. Most importantly, because the operation of comfort station and the conscription of comfort women were carried out by the Japanese military. Many of the women were coerced into the comfort women system through the direct use of force and violence by the Japanese military. At the same time, there is no question that the same male-centric myth that men need sexual outlets, which was used to justify sexual trafficking and the licensed prostitution system, was used to underpin the comfort women system. Obstacles to resolution of the comfort women issue. Despite the dissolution of the Japanese military, the two sexual slavery systems did not go away entirely after Japan's defeat in 1945. Immediately following the end of the war, the Japanese government voluntarily established comfort stations for the U.S. occupying forces. Even after trafficking for the purpose of prostitution was made illegal by the 1956 Anti-Prostitution Act, the hiring of prostitutes itself was never prohibited or made subject to penalty. Therefore, the idea that prostitution is a necessary evil still persists in Japan. Many continue to believe mistakenly that sex trafficking was legal in pre-war period. Based on ignorance or willful disregard of the fact that the trafficking of women as sex slaves was a criminal act by its nature, some right-wing extremists wishing to preserve the honor of the former Japanese military continue to assert that the Japanese military was not guilty as far as comfort women are concerned, and that the Japanese military only made use of licensed prostitutes. The following is a typical example of a statement by a member of the Diet wishing to deny the victimization of comfort women, which was published as an advertisement in a major U.S. newspaper, The Washington Post, on June 14, 2007. This picture is the advertisement in the Washington Post, and it says as follows. The ianfu means comfort women who were embedded with the Japanese army were not, as is commonly reported, sex slaves. They were working under a system of licensed prostitution that was commonplace around the world at the time. Many of the women, in fact, earned incomes far in excess of what were paid to field officers and even generals. And there are many testimonies attesting to the fact that they were treated well. This is the advertisement in the Washington Post, and we think that such ignorance and historical revisionism hinder any prospect of resolving the comfort women issue. Thank you.
I read the second paper, The Japanese Military Sexual Slavery on Trial, Women's International War Crime Tribunal in Tokyo in 2000. So before I start my paper, I would like to show just a little bit image of So do you remember the woman who was standing? She was pregnant. And one of our members finally...
After being forced to serve as a comfort woman in Nanking, Park Young-soo was brought by the 56th Division to Lashio and Matsuyama in Burma. A soldier with the 56th.
And rejected
In the
him.
1990s, Asian women began to break almost 5 decades of painful silence to demand apology and compensation for the atrocities they and others suffered under Japanese military sexual slavery during the war in the 1930s and 1940s in the Asia-Pacific region. The sexual slavery experienced by the women who testified supports a finding that it constitutes crimes against humanity. The system of abductions, transportation, rape, and enslavement of the women were widespread or systematic. In conclusion, the judges find that the emperor knew or should have known about the crimes of sexual violence committed in Nanking, and that he knew or should have known about the establishment and operation of the system of comfort stations. The emperor failed to fulfill his duty, and as such is criminally liable for all of the charges lodged in the indictments with respect to the rape and sexual slavery committed by the Japanese military from 1937 until the end of the war.
In addition to the typical criminal violence the judges have determined that the state
The failure of the International Military Tribunal for the Far East to judge Japanese military sexual slavery. So after the Second World War, the war crime was tried at the Tokyo War Criminal Tribunal. However, Emperor Hirohito, the sacred and inviolable ruler and supreme commander of Imperial Army and Navy, was never tried and retained his position as symbol of Japan even after the war. The issue of Japanese military sexual slavery was also never brought before the male-dominated tribunal and remained unpunished. So in December 1991, 3 Korean women who had been forced to work as sex slaves for the Japanese military filed a lawsuit with the Tokyo District Court. One of these brave women, the Kim Hudson, broke her silence after more than 50 years. For the first time, the Japanese women found themselves face to face with the real comfort women. The Imperial Japanese Army had violently destroyed her dignity as a human being, her future, her happiness, and her entire life. Her clear message was received by women and led to the rapid spread of the movement in Japan. The survivors demand gender justice, fact-finding, and the punishment of perpetrators. The survivors demanded an investigation into the truth about what had happened and the punishment of those responsible. The Japanese government continued to deny legal responsibility until today. The Violence Japan was founded in 1998 and began activities related to the 3 areas, namely the first, comfort women, the second, violence against women in contemporary armed conflict, and third, sexual violence around the United States military bases. The idea of hosting Women's International War Crime Tribunal on Japan's military sexual slavery in Tokyo in 2000 to prosecute those responsible for instituting Japanese military sexual slavery was supported by women from South Korea, North Korea, China, Taiwan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, East Timor, and Netherlands. As a result, the Women's International War Crime Tribunal was established to prosecute gender-based crimes against women during war, which the Tokyo Tribunal failed to judge. So, prosecution of Emperor Hirohito and 9 generals, with the cooperation of the women from Korea and the Philippines. The tribunal was held in December 2000 in Tokyo. The tribunal was established as a result of the failure of states to discharge their responsibility to ensure justice. The tribunal was based on the principles of gender justice and the belief that law is the tool of the civil society. As witnesses to history, 64 survivors attended the tribunal, so during which Emperor Hirohito and 9 generals were prosecuted as the persons responsible for Japanese military sexual slavery. After the war, Emperor Hirohito did not take any responsibility for the war, and any allusions to emperor's war responsibility have become taboo. So that is why the Japanese people were not able to assess war responsibility after the Second World War on their own. So a hard-won judgment. So more than 1,000 individuals, including 400 participants from foreign countries, attended the tribunal. Although we had made every possible effort to provide the evidence to support our case, it was uncertain what decision would be made. The 4 judges pronounced Emperor Hirohito and the 9 generals guilty of rape and sexual slavery. The tribunal recognized Japanese military sexual slavery as a crime against humanity and acknowledged Japanese responsibility to pay reparation to the survivors. In conclusion, the judgment states, repeatedly in history, states have ignored crimes of sexual and gender violence committed against women in armed conflict. The failure of the Allies to prosecute Japan's military sexual slavery system denied the victimized women equal access to law and perpetuated the view that they were willing participants. This exclusion from justice in the immediate aftermath of the war played an unpardonable role in silencing and shaming the survivors and impeding their healings. This judgment was a tribute to the girls and women who were deceived, kidnapped, forcibly relocated, imprisoned in comfort stations, forced to work as slaves against their will during the 15 years of war. So who, after having borne the weight of silence, humiliation, distress, isolation, illness, and intolerable memories for over 54 years after the war, finally broke their silence and provided testimonies in support of the tribunal, formally appreciated and comfort women. So after the tribunal, the NHK is a Japanese version of BBC. So many members of the mass media attended the 4 days tribunal. Altogether, 305 reporters from 143 media outlets, including 200 reporters from 95 foreign outlets, attended the tribunal. Many foreign media including those from Asia, Europe, and the United States, ran headlines along the lines of Emperor Hirohito found guilty, accompanied by articles focusing on punishment of the persons responsible. In Japan, however, not a single Japanese newspaper ran the headline, Emperor Hirohito found guilty. The Yomiuri newspapers, which boast the world's largest circulation, do not report a single line regarding the tribunal. The Korean newspaper Hangul published criticisms of the Japanese mass media with a subtitle, "The World's Attention and Japanese Silence." So 2 months before the tribunal, the NHK proposed a program titled Full Pursuit of the Tribunal. Bonus Japan agreed to cooperate with the NHK. The NHK documentary program was aired on January 30, 2001. However, the essential information, such as the full title of the tribunal, the Women's International War Crime Tribunal, for the trial of Japanese military sexual slavery, the name of host organization, Bonus Japan, and names of the accused, including Emperor Hirohito, were nowhere to be found. The climax of the tribunal, the moment when the presiding judge pronounced the verdict that Emperor Hirohito is guilty, and the next moment when all 64 witnesses and the audience stood up to cheer, was also missing. So on January 30, 2005, the Asahi newspaper published a prominent report that politicians LP Nakagawa Shoichi and Abe Shinzo, serving as the deputy chief cabinet secretaries at that time, the Abe Shinzo, the prime minister now, has pressured NHK to alter to its program. So testimonies by Japanese soldiers, you saw in the film, who were perpetrators, were completely deleted. On the day of broadcast, it was further ordered that the testimony by the comfort women from China be cut. The title of the program was changed from questioning wartime sexual violence by the Japanese army to questioning wartime violence. So the Japanese army was spared. So Bonus Japan could not ignore the fact that a public broadcast had been altered as a result of intervention by politicians. So Bonus Japan filed a lawsuit against NHK. It is like ants trying to fight an elephant, because NHK is a huge organization. We are all women's and very poor women's organization. So many people thought it's ridiculous. But Bonus Japan could not ignore that political intervention. And also the broadcast had been altered. And so we just tried to fight against NHK, huge organization. And Bonus Japan won in the district court, and also we won the Tokyo High Court, but lost in the Supreme Court. We expected that. And so you can read the NHK program alternation Tokyo High Court decision in our website fighting for justice. So the conclusion, what did they want to erase from the NHK program? And like Japanese mass media, they hesitated to mention comfort women or Japanese media should say slavery. So after the tribunal, we started very small Piccolo museum, concentrate on comfort women. And in that year, I was in London, so I just watching the BBC news. Then I saw the BBC news reported, but in Tokyo there is a tiny museum, a specialized comfort women's opened, and I was surprised and very happy. But I asked my friends in Tokyo, and because I called them and I reported them, I saw the Piccolo Museum opened, but no mass media mentioned it. So that most Japanese people didn't know that, but English people here knew that. So that's the Japanese typical mass media. So conclusion. So what did they want to erase from the NHK program? The answer is the Japan that perpetrated a crime of wartime sexual violence against women. The Japanese army was removed from the original title of the program, questioning wartime sexual violence by the Japanese army. So above all, the crux of the tribunal, the verdict affirming the guilt of Emperor Hirohito, was completely erased from the program. What they wanted to erase from the program was Japanese history itself in the period between 1932 and 1945. They wanted to rewrite a clean and glorious history of Japan. The second, they wanted to erase the very existence of all the women who have survived and have testified regarding crimes against women by the Imperial Japanese Army. The thirdly, and finally, they wanted to erase the existence of the Japanese women who helped to convene the Women's International War Crime Tribunal and the strongly linked global network of women who struggle together as part of the international feminist movement. Thank you.
In Japan, I will make the first half of the presentation, and Sachio Tsukamoto will complete it. Comfort women hate speech under the Abe administration. Let's start. Japan's social movement for the resolution of the issue of the Japanese military comfort women, in short, comfort women justice movement, has made a great contribution in creating an international norm identifying the comfort women as sex slaves, whether they were prostitutes or not, just as the first presentation claimed it. Nevertheless, in Japan, the movement has yet to reverse the domestic norm of anti-sexual slavery. Contrary to the international human rights norm, hate speech against comfort women, launched by historical revisionists, has been gaining momentum under the ultra-nationalist leadership of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. These current practices have been effectively preventing the resolution of the issue. In our paper, we will contextualize what has caused the current rise of historical revisionism and juxtapose their counterattack on the comfort women justice movement. This is the chronology of the comfort women movement. This transnational feminist activism was initially launched as a response to Asian victims' testimonies heard from 1991. One of the most significant achievements of the movement was the 1993 Kono Statement, which admitted the Japanese Army's involvement in the coordination of the sexual slavery and coercion in recruitment and prostitution. The Kono Statement is on the last page of the handout. In handout, that the comfort women issue was introduced into history textbook for middle school. However, the backlash campaign was promoted by Japanese Society for History Textbook Reform, JSHTR, established in 1996. This campaign has been orchestrated by Japanese historical revisionists, including politicians, business people, celebrities, cartoonists, and novelists. JSHTR succeeded in eliminating the comfort women issue from all history textbook in 2006. The next target for the attack was the Kono Statement, which has been supported by the world community as well as comfort women justice activists. In this year, the February, Prime Minister Abe stated in the diet session that there had been no evidence discovered to prove coerced recruitment of comfort women. Of course, in reality, a lot of evidence has been discovered. Just 1 month ago, the Abe cabinet re-examined the process of coordination in the wording of Kono Statement with South Korea, whereby they attempt to legitimize the statement. In 2010, comfort women hate speech has been prevailing. This picture shows how hate speech demonstration is going on. This placard says, "Kill both of good and bad Koreans." In this placard says, in this picture, demonstrators are hoisting a flag with swastika. This is an example of comfort women hate speech. The hate speaker says the truth of comfort women is voluntary prostitute. Do you remember the statue? Yes. We saw it in the picture of Wednesday demonstration in Seoul. This is original statue of comfort girl in Seoul. In collaboration with historical revisionists, the vital goal of the comfort women hate speech is to discard the Kono Statement in following processes: spreading hatred towards Korea and China, restricting the survivors to solely Koreans, labeling the survivors as voluntary prostitutes or liars, and perpetrating public discourse which seeks to acquit Japan's war crime. In lockstep with the Abe cabinet, the media and the internet site has been encouraging the comfort women hate speech by claiming the comfort women were prostitutes, or the idea that comfort women were sex slaves was simply a publication, or supporting it by ignorance and silence. It is a fact of life that Japan's right-wing internet site, newspaper, and magazine publishers and broadcasting companies has been generating profits by creating special features to promote hatred against Korean or attack against the survivors. Currently, hate speech has been serving corporate interests by creating business opportunities. In other words, business industries have nurtured the hate speech. The phenomena explained have been underpinned by the intersection of diverse ideologies. They include colonialism, which denies Japan's past aggression and colonization, racism, nationalism based on historical revisionism, and sexism ignorance, the survivors' plight of sexual violence. It is of a great concern that the comfort women hate speech is widespread among ordinary people, including women who have not learned anything about Japan's wartime past as a perpetrator at school. Last year, the Osaka mayor Hashimoto stated that everyone knew that comfort women system was necessary during the wartime. Hashimoto was a corporate lawyer of one of the biggest restaurant unions, which is, in reality, a prostitution ring. This is Restaurant Street, located in the site of a former prostitution district. In those restaurants, prostitution goes on in a scenario. Soliciting a customer, a woman fall in love with him upstairs. Thus, Japan's pre-war licensed prostitution system has been perpetrated in different forms. Hashimoto's remarks reveal exactly what the male-centric myth is about, as claimed in the past presentation. What is worse, a great number of Japanese men have supported his remarks. Why? The notion of the male-centric myth asserts that male sexual desire cannot be controlled, so that men need to deal with such desires properly, whereby they do not want to rape women. Therefore, men need prostitutes in daily lives, and soldiers need comfort women in wartime. This male-centric myth, which necessitates the marginalization of women, is wrong. In that nothing can stop rape. In reality, male sexual desire is socially constructed. In Japan, sex industries are prosperous and pornography are ubiquitous.
Okay, please look at these images. How would you feel about them? These are part of a Japanese famous artist Makoto Aida's series of work entitled Dogs, which was in exhibition at a prestigious Japanese museum. Would you think they are sexual violence or an erotic artwork? These paintings are appraised as an art, even though they demonstrate the commodification of sexual violence against women rather than commercialization of female sex. Thus, the male-centric myth has been expanding and strengthening day in and day out. Notwithstanding Japan's status as an economic power, the social status of Japanese female is very low, along with increasing poverty among women. The following chart reveals such precarious situation for women. The first one, the 50% of women are temporary workers with low incomes in comparison to just 20% for men. And women temporary workers earn just 50% of male regular workers' income. So the plight of women living in poverty has caused a paradoxical relationship between women's poverty and the sex industries. The sex industries have become a safety net guaranteeing high salary with short working hours for poor women, even though there's a violation of human rights. This is the reason why women facing poverty and social exclusion are attracted by the promoters of the sex industries. In this manner, the social structure which created the comfort women system has been reconstructed and perpetuated. All in all, Japan is regarded as the heaven for men, where male sexual desires are prioritized before women's human rights. This is the social background nurturing the norm that comfort women are not sexual slaves, but necessarily evils. The comfort women justice activism is reaching a very, very critical moment now. We are required to address how to combat hate speech, how to disseminate the fact that comfort women's system is a sexual slavery, as the 2000 Women's War International Crimes Tribunal ruled, and how to maintain and develop the corner statement before urging official apology, whereby paying the compensation to the survivors. As explained in our first and second presentation, BAWRAC as the succeeding entity of the BAWNet Japan in the pursuit of expanding solidarity with the world community has vigorously contested Japan's imperialism and successfully organized the Women's International War Crimes Tribunal in solidarity with victim countries. In this aim, last year, we launched a website entitled Fight for Justice. The Japanese military comfort women resistance to forgetting and responsibility for the future. The main purpose of our website is to combat hate speech nurtured by right wing, which dominates Japan's online resources. Our website is providing clear sources and evidence such as archival documentation and testimonies, thus clarifying the historical facts as well as who is responsible for the Japanese military comfort women system. Good news is recently counter-attack against the hate speech demonstration has been launched like this. A continuous appeal to world opinion is another significant purpose of our website, given Japan's sensitivity to world opinions. Pressure from the world community has prevented the Japanese government from revising the Kono statement. Fight for Justice website is released in 4 languages: Japanese, English, and Chinese and Korean. So we hope that every one of you will disseminate this site into your community. Currently, the confrontation revolving around the comfort women issue has been widespread across the national borders, involving relations between Japan, China, and Korea. For example, the establishment of the statue to commemorate comfort women in the United States has revealed the historical controversy has created the similar confrontation in the West. There are Western people who stay away from this issue, just marginalizing this issue as an issue of the East Asia. However, the sexual slavery versus necessary evil debate around comfort women issue has already reached the United Nations. This month, the United Nations organized the 111th of the Human Rights Committee, where a Japanese female right-wing group organized for the first time a lobby for the Japanese government. insisting that Japanese military comfort women were not sexual slavery. And what is worse, the name of this group is very similar to ours. Look at that. The Women for Justice and Peace, so please don't make a mistake about it. Thus, the global war over the debate about the Japanese military comfort women were necessarily evil or sexual slavery has just begun. Wartime sexual violence persecuted by the comfort women issue is continuously reproduced on a daily basis. The male-centric myth is generated within a society which is rife with domestic violence, child pornography, rape, and sex trafficking. As a result, the male-centric myth promotes sexual abuses within the army, rape as a weapon of war, and the system of the comfort women. Unless this vicious cycle is broken, the violence against women will be intensified. Therefore, what is needed is the establishment of network in order to promote a better understanding of the comfort women issue in society. So in furtherance of this aim, we would like to propose the creation of networks beyond borders, thereby sharing and disseminating information of the issue. And today we have tons of this handout to disseminate the information about our website, Fight for Justice. So if you can distribute these handouts into your students, to your colleagues, and into your community, we will appreciate it very much. So please ask us. So thank you for your cooperation and patience.
Yes. I mean, I find this very difficult as a woman in sort of West and to think about how this is going on. And also to think about this as something that is not an isolated incident, so it's something that affects all of us. Questions?
There's one thing that we would like to ask you, because as I told you, we're not good at English. So please make sure that your question is very short and clear, and take a break between some paragraphs.
I try my very best. When I went upstairs to look up your topic, I realized that Amnesty International has already set up a fact sheet about that issue of comfort women. Amnesty International is that NGO. And they have already set up that fact sheet. That's what it is called. Fact sheet. Yes, please. Just repeat it proper English what I'm saying. So they have set up their fact sheet on comfort women, and it was rather a comment than a question actually.
アムネスティ・インターナショナルがたくさんの NGO を作ってて、その中でそのコンフォート・ウィメン慰安婦問題に、対応するグループをすでに作ってる。I know.
Yeah, we knew that. Okay.
Oh, I might have missed it. I just haven't found it in your presentation, and I haven't found it in the paper, but well, probably my mistake.
And your question is?
It wasn't it was a comment.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question. The support for the counterattacks against the hatred speech, I noticed that they were young women. Where is that rallying force, or where are they getting that support and that knowledge from to advocate that? Or is there a network of support there?
The counterattack, right?
Yeah, the women.
Counterattack, women's counterattack. どこそのカウンターアタックをしている女性たちがどういうサポートを受けてどういうところからその知識を得てるかどこから何を学んで
ネットだと思う。主にインターネット、それと畑井貴子というそのライトウィングの学者がいて、まず一つが畑井貴子、二つがインターネット。
First of all, there are some very famous scholars who, who are right wing, and they are regarded as a very prestigious scholars in Japan. They have a very high ranking position in university. Those and the one of the famous scholar is Ikuhiko Hata. Not so high ranking, they say, but he's very famous. And secondly, there are, as we told you, there are lots of online resources, which is very accessible to everybody.
だからもうそういうね、右翼のを聞くと右翼のサイトになるので、私たちがこれを作ったというちょっと説明を。
So, and on the Japan's website, when would you like to get some information about comfort women, and just go into the internet, and what comes first is something from the right-wingers website. That's why we just created this website for people to educate.
My sort of question is because I think that for some that the comfort women issue is something that we've recently been introduced to. I mean, would you? I think one of the things that would be really interesting to explain is how these comfort women, when they were taken out of their countries, the difficulty in being brought back to Korea. There was the sense of the women being sort of the problems that the Korean government also had with it, you know, with the comfort women. That it seemed to me there's some sort of complicity there. That in terms of the Korean women, the Korean government had difficulty in accepting the plight of these women, and actually, with the work I've done, as far as I understand, is that wouldn't provide a way for these women who were outside of Korea to come back home. So I wondered if you wanted to say something about that.
韓国の慰安婦の方が自分たちの国に戻るときに特に韓国の政府がその彼女たちを受け入れたくないというか、その彼女たちの苦しみをその十分に中でその受け取って、歓迎して入れることができないというその難しさがあった。でそれについてどういうふうに思いますか？
それは韓国政府も対応が変わってきたので、なんか運動体が韓国の場合にすごい平均的な運動体がすごく強いので、その運動体が政府に働きかけて、それで例えば最初は帰国に対して支援をしなかったのが2000年代になると帰国を推進するという支援をするとか、それからそういう海外に住む被害者にも支援金、生活支援金を出すとかっていうふうに運動体が働きかけて非常に前向きになったというところを。
Recently, the Korean government has changed their attitude toward the former comfort women because of a very active female NGOs who has been supporting the comfort women inside the South Korea. So the South Korean government has given the kind of financial support to the former comfort women living in Korea as well as living abroad. So that's the main reason they have changed their circumstances.
I mean, it's interesting because that actually shows what women can do and what protests can do to actually change that. Because for sort of when the issue first came out, that there wasn't really, South Korean government didn't want to do anything about it. And the fact that protest groups have actually changed that, I think really shows what sort of organisations like yours do, and also what women together and men together can do in terms of changing the way things are.
そういう韓国のようにその女性のNGO が、男性も含めてですけれども、連帯をして、そしてその国とか政府の姿勢を変えていくっていうことがとても素晴らしいとおっしゃってますね。
その通りです。
And also the so-called comfort women themselves, they started a Nabi Foundation. Nabi means butterfly. So butterfly is a symbol of freedom. And so comfort women themselves, they are not just victims, but they are actors. So they donated their money, and then they helped women in Africa, Congo. And so women in Congo who are raped and have children, so they receive that money and bought land, and they living together and try to support themselves. So that is, I think, the great change of so-called comfort women.
Please look at this brochure, and on the left-hand side there is a picture of two survivors. This is the long history of the demonstration. Every Wednesday they have a demonstration like this with former comfort women in front of the Japanese embassy.
Every Wednesday. For more than 20 years.
Since 1992.
1992. Every Wednesday. In front of the Japanese embassy.
Japanese embassies all over the world?
No, in South Korea, in Seoul.
In Seoul. So more than, I think, the 1,000, maybe 100. Yeah, maybe 1,200 times. So this is maybe the longest demonstration.
20年以上、22年だって、
For 22 years. So maybe Guinness Book should.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I was wondering about that, about transnational networking with other, like with Congo, for example. So you partly answered my question, and I was wondering, like, you know, if that's if you have come to the conclusion that there are comfort stations right now in some areas of the world, like stations that are organized next to mining sites, like in Congo, for men who work there, and if you have built like analysis and solidarity with the women there. So that was part of the question, and also I was interested in knowing how this activism is perceived. If there's a strong feminist movement in Japan, because I know that I've looked into that museum maybe earlier this year, and it's second floor, and it's quite confidential from what I saw, and that because my understanding is there were threats towards the women that organized this museum.
そうです。最初の質問はその今後の先ほどの炭鉱の話みたいな、そういうその世界の連帯の動きの中で他のそういうグループとの連帯も考えていますかっていうことなんですけど。
それはもちろん当然考えて。
Yeah, we are trying to network more and more, and in cooperation with those different types of groups which has faced kind of sexual violence against women, as you told, just as you told us that the minors in Congo, like that. So,
あとね、
And Colombia.
and Colombia.
あとね、ベトナム戦争における韓国軍がベトナム女性をしたレイプに対しても最近動きを始めたし、それから韓国内にあるレイプのメンタルもしているということで、外にも向けてもらってるし、中でも。
And also the Korean women's organization who supported comfort women, and they also look at their own army. So during the Vietnam War, because the United States almost forced Korean government to send army to fight together in Vietnam, so that many Korean army went to Vietnam, and soldiers raped Vietnamese women. So now the babies grown up, and Korean women's organization now started to help survivors of raped women in Vietnam. So they are sending money and helping them. So one of the leader of Yoon Jong-ok, Professor Yoon Jong-ok is a person who started comfort women issues in Korea. So she is now 90 years old, but she's still visiting Vietnam to help survivors. But this year, unfortunately, Professor Yoon Jong-ok fell down. And so some damage of the bone is injured. But and also I mentioned the small museum in Tokyo, but in Korea, Seoul, there is also the very good, very nice museum, specialized comfort women issue. And also in Taiwan, Taipei, maybe the museum will be open in December this year. So all of us cooperate together, visiting together, and but unfortunately we didn't cooperate with English speaking.
And actually, it costs a lot of money, so we have a very serious financial problem. But as I told you in my presentation, we really would like to network with all of you, gathering under the same problem. So we welcome any cooperation from all of you.
I was wondering about the continued perpetuation of the stereotypes that have come up around comfort women, and how that plays out in terms of foreign occupation by militaries of the West, because having grown up on a military base in Hawaii, there was often a lot of talk by US military about Japan being the dream to be stationed at for the reason of comfort, the ideas around comfort women, that Japanese women are made for the comforts of military men, and if you can speak a little to how your organization, or if your organization addresses that part of it, because it seems to be so intertwined and interconnected to that.
米軍基地の問題ですよね。 それに私たちのこの NGO がどういうふうに何かこう取り組んでいますかということなんです。
私たちは取り組んでないけど、私たちは取り組んでないけど、
なんかやってる。
基地、それ自体の建設の反対運動はやってる。
そうですね。沖縄の基地。
そうです。沖縄。
それと
その戦後のRA のところ。
だからちょっと訳してほしいんだけど、その要するにこう米軍占領期に日本政府がボランタリーに作った米軍用の慰安施設というのが RAA といって、なんだっけ、でそれは要するにその発想も組織の在り方もあと女性も連続している面がある。こうやっぱりレイプを防ぐということと、それから実際慰安婦をやってた人がなんていうかになっちゃったっていうこともあって、で要するに一部の女性を犠牲にして他の女性たちを守るというなんていうかな大義名分がある。これが繰り返されているっていうことで、ですね。それを私たちはそういうことも研究しようとしているっていう、調査しているっていう。
Do you know the Japanese government after the end of the World War set up the kind of comfort women stations for the U.S. military during the occupation, and there are a lot of parallels between the former wartime military comfort women's system for the Japanese military and those for the U.S. military. So, for example, the former comfort women for the Japanese military still kept working at the RAA, which was called to the comfort women system for the U.S. military. So that the same person just worked for the Japanese government and the Japanese military as well as the U.S. military is like this. So we are trying to do a lot of research about those systems as well, because there is the same essential issues running under. So that's what we are trying to do.
Especially Okinawa Island. Because Okinawa Island is around only 4% of the whole Japan.
Right.
But 75 American base concentrated in Okinawa. So there are many women were raped, and also the many prostitution areas. So, and also the Japanese government now try to expand the American military base in Okinawa, and it's a beautiful sea because all coral reef, and also the I don't know the name of it. Dugong is dugong.
It's a very unique animal, unique to Okinawa area.
Okinawa, yeah. So it's a beautiful sea was now trying to build the base. So one of our members used to visit Okinawa. They joined the movement against construction of American base.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
I was quite surprised that video footage that you showed at the beginning. I was quite surprised how openly these veterans of war were speaking about them personally raping. Personally, in my research, I never kind of came across people who would say, I rape for the reasons X, Y, Z. So I wondered whether it was just two of those men for the entire trial, or whether there were more people willing to speak that openly. I mean, the perpetrators, the rapists. So.
その元兵士の人たちの証言が出てましたけども、お二人これ以外にももっと出てる方がいらっしゃるのかどうかっていう。
それに関してはなんて戦争犯罪を告白する兵士はいても、自分がレイプしたということを言うのが限られていて、10分の指に入る10分にも及ばないと、10人もこの人たちが最大なんじゃないかと。それで 彼らはその名前を出して顔を出さなくてもいいっていうふうにこちらが言ったにもかかわらず、名前を出して、顔を出して証明したいということを言ったということと、それから、それでその彼らが言ったことが被害者にとってはすごくこう癒しになったというね、要するに自分の言っていることが、被害者たちが言っていることが本当であるということを証明してくれたということで、この法廷の時に拍手が被害者から。
It's very, very difficult because you saw the two soldiers. So when they attended that our tribunal, there will be how to say, なんていうの、排除される。
They might have been excluded from the communities and from the society as well.
So Veterans Association is, well, maybe any country the same, a very strong tie.
Boys clubs.
So they were betrayed, the Veterans Association. So that is very, very difficult. But there are few, very small group of Japanese soldiers who were imprisoned in China. So in China there is very peculiar, or very excellent war criminal camp. Yeah, and the Chinese officers in that camp asked Japanese soldiers, write your experience during the wartime, what you have done in China. So then just write, but not really the reality. And so then just ask again, write again, write again, write again. So the Chinese never punished the Japanese soldiers, but just they treated to confess everything, what they done in China. So as a result, very small group of Japanese soldiers who were imprisoned in that camp came back to Japan. They keep their organization, and then they started to work anti-war movement. So these soldiers usually to Chinese, the soldiers who came back from China is the group name. But so they very honestly of their experience. But rape cases are very difficult, and rape cases are really, really difficult, especially to confess in front of. And also one important thing is you can see this in the film. Two soldiers confessed they raped women in China. But surprisingly, many survivors clap hands. And also they confessed they went to comfort stations. So then the comfort, we felt very peculiar why the survivors clapped hands. So they confessed they went to comfort station. Why the women clapped hand? Then later we understood the comfort women because they told their experience, but many people didn't trust them. So the soldiers is really, well, I think that's the truth. All women told stories, that's true.
I just wanted to say, I think some of those soldiers, the Japanese soldiers, were actually, after Japan lost, were then left in China, just left and abandoned by the Japanese. So perhaps feeling betrayed by their own country, then I know for a fact that
中国に置き去りにされたので、軍から裏切られたと思ったんじゃないかっておっしゃってるんです。
No, this is not true. Because it's not very small group of soldiers, but all Japanese soldiers were imprisoned right after the war. So all soldiers, Japanese soldiers in foreign countries, just experience, same experience. So just
So I probably will start just by introducing myself. I know I came just this afternoon. My name is Anissa Daudi. I'm from the University of Birmingham. I thank you so much for this fascinating conference, and I apologize I should have come yesterday. I am organizing a conference in October on the 9th and 10th of October, and I work on the Middle East and North Africa. And your fascinating stories to me are what I heard just now is a happy ending, whereas what's happening in my region, in the Middle East, is happening now, in this day and age. It's still happening, and what you are talking about as comfort women, we have this is happening now with a group of religious people groups calling themselves all sorts of names, is ISIS or Daesh, or they have different names, where basically they go to a town, kidnap women, and offer them what they call jihad, sexual, and basically it's offering sexual favors to the mujahideen or to the men who are fighting. The problem or the sad story is not as straightforward, where you know who the rapist is and you want to take them to justice or later on. The problem is we don't know. And the worst scenario for me personally, and I talk about this with emotion, because to me you also find women who voluntarily would go, and we have been pursuing a few cases from Tunisia where women who have been, to me, brainwashed and who would go voluntarily, and it's only after they go there and they spend some time that they realize that basically they've been let down and they have been basically brainwashed. This is just really a flash of what the situation is in the Middle East and North Africa. North Africa, I work on Algeria in particular, where I work on the two cases of the War of Liberation as well as the 1990s, where we had the civil war, where women were also raped by Islamists, but to date we cannot persecute them because the government has issued a law basically forgiving all the perpetrators or all the rapists. And it's actually out of question that you will dig anything out and make it into public. We really, hopefully, we wish that we come to a day where these women come to a tribunal case like yourselves, and their case will be heard. Sorry I took long. I thought I would talk just for 2 minutes, but I really would like to welcome all of you. I have taken that brochure of yours, and I will write to you, inviting you. I would be really more than honored if you could come, and if you could help with any, not necessarily money. It could be sometimes just ideas. What you might have done, and is easy for you, might not come even as an idea to someone who has not been there.
So thank you for during the 4 days tribunal, women's tribunal, we have a international public hearing of the crime against women under the contemporary armed conflict. So the women from Afghanistan, Vietnam, Okinawa, Brunei, Korea, Tibet, Somalia, West Sahara, Colombia, Guatemala, and the United States participated. And one of them, woman from Guatemala, who was when she was 16 years old, she was just distributing flyers of labor unions. But she was captured by the police and tortured and again raped and imprisoned but finally she escaped. And then, because she was attending the Women's Tribunal, she swore one day, I will organize the same things in Guatemala.
A really nice point to finish on. Thank you so much.
Which one of you have been doing the longest?
中野さんですよね。一番長く関わってる人。
You have. Okay. And what brought it to your attention? What was the first thing you read about it?
In 1992, the first comfort woman, Kim Hak-sun, just came out.
Okay.
This is the first time I faced the comfort women.
Oh, okay.
And this is the beginning.
Right.
And since then, the many survivors from Korea, Taiwan, China, Malaysia, I just listened to their stories.
Right.
That's the beginning.
That was 1992.
Yeah, 1990s.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
She's the oldest experience.
Oh, so yours is before 92.
だから1991だから1919なんかだから1990年の12月にユン・ジョンオク先生の在日女性のための講演会があって、それは慰安婦問題に関するその在日女性を集めた講演会があって、そこでユン・ジョンオク先生と初めて出会って慰安婦問題についての講演を聞いたことがきっかけとなって、それでユン・ジョンオク先生が作ったなんて新聞に載せた取材機、低身体取材機を翻訳して、でそれをそのパンフレットにしたんですよ。でそこから始まった。それが1990年に12月になって、1991年にそのパンフレットを出版。
1991年に出版したんです。
出版というか自主出版だけどね。でそれがすごく売れて、でそうした中でキム・ハクスンさんがまだ終わりと
この1991年の出版は何を出版したんですか？
だからユン・ジョンオクさんの低身体取材機を翻訳して、一緒に自主出版したのが最初。
ユン・ジョンオクさんっていうのはどっかの大学の先生？
理科女子大学の先生で、1980年代から、低身体取材機というかその足跡を追うそうした10年間ぐらい活動をずっとしてきて、でそれを新聞にまとめたのを1990年の1月に新聞に出してたんですよ。でそれを私たちが出会って翻訳をするというふうになったのがきっかけ。
Miss Buja Kim took part in a conference organized by Yoon Jong-ok, who was a professor at IFA University in South Korea, who had been reported the former comfort women so far.
Okay.
And there she encountered the comfort women issue for the first time, and she translated the report organized by the professor and published those reports in 1991 when the first Korean comfort women broke the silence.
私だけじゃなくて4人の仲間でね。4人の仲間で。
Okay. Where else have you taken this talk? Like when you are taking the fight for justice discussions like today, which other countries have you been to?
この今日やったような会議での発表を他のどっかの国でやったことはありますかっていうことなんですけど。
だから今日みたいな話を他の国でやったことがあるか。バウネット時代だったらたくさんあるよね。という
ことをmany times。
バウネット時代は
だから日本ではたくさんあるんだけど、日本ではたくさんあるんだけども、海外に向けてやるってアジア連帯会議とか、それから韓国ではよくやってるかな、比較的。それであと中原さんはいろんなところでたくさん。
じゃあ中原さん答えて。
中原さん答えて。中原さん。
これ多分一番下。
何なんか今すぐ言われても分かんない。I think all of us we are member of Barnet Japan. So as Barnet Japan, we used to organize conference and seminars and a lot of opportunity to talk about this topic in Japan. But outside of Japan,
First time now?
both in the United States. So I always gave lecture on this issue in the United States, and also in England, and also Germany last year. And
What about the Asian countries like Thailand or places that were affected? It's difficult, I guess, to go to there.
yeah, in Asian countries, I did in Malaysia.
Oh, okay.
I did in Korea, South Korea.
And I was a student at the University of Nottingham in the UK. And last year I organized a kind of symposium. And I organized a panel discussion in the symposium to attract more students inside the university to raise awareness about the comfort women issue there.
So similar to today then?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. The Wednesday protest in Seoul, have you all been, all of you? Or have you been?
No demonstration 全部出たことないですか? Yes, of course.
Of course, because it's very close, And also, have you been more than once? More than one time?
Yeah, more than once.
I'm glad
I don't remember how many times.
Okay. Japan has the museum you mentioned before, and Korea has the House of Sharing, which has a museum. I think it's a house and a museum.
And the museums as well. Yeah.
But any other countries, do they have something?
Well, in Taiwan they are going to be open in the end of this year. That I heard. Yeah.
それから中国でもコンテンポラリーなコンテンポラリーな展示会がある。
Yeah.
中国でありました。
In China, not museum itself, but the exhibitions in many cities. Yes.
Yeah, because I heard you mention before that the Taiwan was opening this year, which is good. But China's good because if it's a big place, but if they can start somewhere.
So especially like Guam. In Tokyo, they organize the exhibition in China in various cities.
Okay, thank you.
And Fight for Justice website is website museum.
So it's called the Fight for Justice.
Website museum. We think.
Yeah, so you can visit website museum.
Actually, I'm happy you mentioned their website because the Korean one, Women at War. You know that one? Korean website, Women at War. It's the same.
あるだから
You know?
ある政府が作ったやつだ。ウェブサイト。
Made by the Korean government.
Korean government.
She said.
But can they connect the two websites? Can they connect?
だから定対協とかはつながってる。コネクト、リンク。
Connect with
だからリンクしてます。
なんだっけな。Korean Council for
定対協。
drafted なんだっけ。定対協の英語の名前。The Korean Council.
Yeah, Korean Council. That's a kind of private female organization in Korea. That's connected to our website.
Yeah.
Because I went on Women at War, but many months ago. But I wasn't looking for Fight for Justice. Maybe there was a link. Yeah. Ah, okay. Okay, I will move on because I know. At the moment, there is a story doing on the internet and the news about the US soldiers saying that the Korean government allowed it to happen. Do you know about this?
You mean the comfort, kind of the
for the military.
prostitution rings provided for the U.S. military?
Yeah. But the government, the Korean, this woman is suing.
Suing it, right?
And I mean, is that going to change things? Because the Korean government before, the Korean government was saying we are innocent. Now it sounds like they are. Do you have any thoughts?
そのキッチョンの女性たちが韓国政府を訴えたことで何かこれから社会が変わると思いますか？どういう考えを持ってますか？私たちがそれについて。
だからやっとだから声を上げられなくなんかヤングの人たちと違って基地村の女性たちが国家に対して保障を求めるっていうことが前は考えられなかったことなのにそういう動きが出てきたっていうことは画期的なことだと思うんだけども、ただ韓国社会ではあまり報道されていないでむしろ日本で右翼の保守派の人たちが騒いでいるという状況だということがまず言えると。ただこれに関してはさっき言った定対協も含めてその女性団体が支援しているというような非常に画期的な動きもあるのが無視できないというようなことで、
だって考えられなかったらね、基地村の女性がね、それやっぱり慰安婦問題があったからね、できたことよね。
それでちゃんとそこはつながってるってことが重要。
This time suing by the military prostitutes against the South Korean government is an eye-opening because there have been nobody who made it happen actually, but inside the South Korea there has been全然なかったんですかね。There has been a few reports about this issue, but in contrast, in Japan, we had a lot of report about what they sue, the South Korea government. So it is not so easy for them to change the society.
The Fight for Justice Museum in Japan, does that have people, the women affected, still staying there? Like the House of Sharing, that they live there. Do any Japanese women affected live there? Is it different? They live somewhere.
ナヌムの家のように、その日本のミュージアムの中でナヌムの家みたいにシェアリングハウスをしている元日本人の慰安婦の方とかいるんですかっていうことなんですけど。
管理者夫人の村、そうね。
なんかなんだろう、そうですね。名前がそうなってる。
同期村じゃなくてその施設を村って言ってる。
There is an institution where the poor women, including the former comfort women, used to live together, and the memorial statue to commemorate the comfort women has been hoisted in that institution. But the only Japanese comfort women who came forward, unofficially actually, used to live there, but she passed away many years ago. There has been no Japanese comfort women surviving right now.
They're all gone.
No, they're gone.
This is not about Japan, but this is the woman in there talked about the Hawaii and the Okinawa islands that you said you went to. But the similar thing, the Navy base is going to be built on Jeju Island. It's to do with Korea, but many Japanese tourists go there. So some people say if that happens, if the army base opens, there will be prostitutes on the island and comfort women. Do you think that is going to be a problem?
それ今日のテーマですよね。だから軍が行くところには買収が必ずついてくるっていうか、それをどう思いますかってことなんですけど。
だからその男性神話との関係で男の性欲が無条件に肯定されて、でなんか それって遊郭の江戸時代からなんだけども、要するにその女をあてがってその治安維持、という発想が江戸時代からすごく長くあるのね。
チェジュ島のっていうのは、
チェジュ島
そう、チェジュ島の話。
チェジュ島は韓
So I
国
think
のネイ
on
ビー。
the area on Jeju is Gangjong.
あ、カンジョン。
I don't know the same in Korea.
で
In
コリア
Japanese.
のその要するにネイビーが
そうですそうです
の要するに売春をしているということをどう思いますかっていう。
っていうか、まあ、それは例なんですけど、だからその軍の行くところには要するにやっぱ売春婦がついてくるっていうのをどう思うかってことなんですよね。
まあだから日本のアーミーに限らず
そうです。日本じゃなくて世界中の
要するに男だけがね集団手当で。
英語で言って
だから
やっぱり不自然なことでしょう。
だからそういうなんかあと人を殺す軍隊はなんか必然的にそのなんて言うんでしょう、その人権を無視するということもあり。でそのどの国の軍隊がやることであれ、それは本来許されないことであるってことをお願いいたします。なんだあなたが言うの。いやだから。
Like I think that as far as the army existed in any place in the world, always this issue would happen. The sex.
Yeah, sex. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Sorry.
So I think that's why we are really against the army itself.
Like your slogan, no war, no violence.
Yeah.
That's your
No war.
thing. The younger generation in Japan, do all of them know the problem? Do all of them know about the Japanese comfort women, their own women? Or do the government are trying to keep it very quiet? I just wondered.
だから今の日本の特に若者が日本人慰安婦についてどのくらい知ってるか、それとももう政府が全部そういうのをこう隠してね、蓋をしてしまってそういう情報なんか知らなくなるのか。
日本軍じゃないの？日本人。
You mean the Japanese comfort women for the military?
Yeah, I mean, because they think it's just Korean, Chinese, but if they don't know it's their own.
そう、日本人慰安婦ですね。日本人慰安婦です。
その若い人がそれを知ってるかどうか。だからその若い人たちは日本人慰安婦の存在を知ってる人もいるけれども。
ほとんど知らないでしょ。
でもなんか結構丸つけてたよ、アンケートで。知ってる人もいる。で、日本政府はそのあれですね、いたことを認めてるけども、その人たちはお金を儲けて仕事としてやったのだというふうにその言っているその右翼の政治家たちがいるという。で、若い人たちもそういうふうに思ってる人たちがいるっていうことでいいかな。
それとだから日本人慰安婦名乗らないことに対してそのなんけ非常にそれを肯定的にさ受け止めてるわけじゃない。
その日本人の右翼たちが要するにそのなんて言うんでしょうかね、その名乗り出ない日本人慰安婦たちは偉いとその言っていたりすると。でも今若い人のこと聞かれてるね。
若い人
は知ってる。
ほとんど知らないよ。その辺の詳しい
事情は知らない。
だけど教科書に載ってないから。
教科書には載ってないし、でも日本人慰安婦がいたことを知ってる若い人はいて、でも売春婦だから。その問題ないんじゃないかと思っている。
ただね、やると挑戦
全然この間で話してる
なんか慰安婦はイコール朝鮮人だと思ってる人が多くて、基本はそれなんですよ。それでその日本人がいたっていうとびっくりする人もいるということも言った上で今のことを言ったらいい。
All Japanese history textbooks do not refer to the issue of the comfort women. That's why there's a few young people who knows about, especially the existence of the Japanese comfort women. On the other hand, there are some young people who think that the almost all comfort women are clean. So. That makes a difference.
で日本人慰安婦がいたということを知っている日本人の若い人も彼女たちは売春婦だったんだから構わないと思っている人がいる。
Even young people who have known that the Japanese comfort women work in the comfort station during the wartime tend to think this way. Those Japanese comfort women were former prostitutes, so they just could make a living by servicing their sexual, or providing the sexual service. So
voluntary.
So it is not a problem. For
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just want to say thanks.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So-